of being a commercial enterprise as a network news president and being, in some ways, a slave to ratings, and then going a little more highbrow and giving people more sort of obscure and maybe less infotainment. Are there other cases where you really struggled with that conundrum?
Well, we struggled all the time. I'll give you an example of that. The Iraq War in 2003 drew very large audiences at the beginning. It was sort of like a John Wayne movie, the troops marching into Baghdad and it falling and the toppling of Saddam Hussein and things like that. But within a few months, the American people were not very interested in the Iraq War. When you put it up, people would run away. And yet we felt a real obligation, a responsibility. We had hundreds of thousands of troops over there, and people were dying. I mean, certainly U.S. soldiers, servicemen were dying, but also Iraqis were dying. And so we felt a real obligation. So it was an ongoing struggle after a few months into the war to be covering this in a way that we thought would engage people and they'd pay attention, because if people aren't paying attention, then you're not doing any good. You're just talking to yourself. But we needed to cover it, and it was an ongoing struggle.
Well, what about Afghanistan? I mean, a lot of media outlets were criticized. In fact, it was, I think the cover of Time magazine was The Forgotten War, because people pretty much ignored it after a certain period of time. Do you have any regrets about not focusing more on Afghanistan during that kind of lull, David, when people really weren't focused on it and were focused primarily on Iraq?
Well, certainly I think we could have done a better job. All of us could have done a better job with Afghanistan. It was a hard story to cover. First of all, the Afghan war itself was very hard because there was a lot of special forces and things. It was not the John Wayne, marching up to Baghdad to take it over. And if you think about it from a coverage point of view, we had people in, but it was dangerous because they were not embedded with U.S. troops and things. And it was very difficult to cover Afghanistan. Should we as a country have focused on Afghanistan more? Yes. And therefore, do we in the media bear some responsibility for that? Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.